Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Well, hello. Today we have someone very special for you. Our guest today has been on our podcast 2 times before. Our first episode with Dr. John Campbell was called Chasing Dragons, and the second episode was called JC, Our Own Personal Jesus, ? So you can go back and listen about John's story around addiction, Buddhism, compassion, and how he got to where he is in his life, as well as the second episode was more about modern yoga and projection and guru culture and our tendency to place teachers on pedestals. But today we are going into a whole new direction. So we're not talking about the early Mysore days, and we're not talking about his story in particular, except this is maybe a kind of a continuation of his story. John Campbell, Dr. John Campbell, our beautiful, beautiful soul brother, is just a fascinating human because not only is he a certified Ashtanga yoga teacher, which means he spent a lot of time in Mysore, India, under the teachings of Sri K. Pattabhi Jois, becoming a certified teacher, finishing 4th series in Mysore, India. And if you're an Ashtanga yoga practitioner, you know how hard that is, how long you need to be in India, how many trips that is, how hard you have to kind of work, what you're giving up. But he's also a scholar, a PhD of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. He holds a PhD in religion from Columbia University and was a professor and the head of a department at the University of Virginia at one point, and he helped establish the Contemplative Sciences Center at UVA. And he's also worked extensively with Dr. Robert Thurman, who many of you probably know and love, who is also a scholar and teacher of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism and a beloved friend of the Dalai Lama. So John has worked on translating Sanskrit and Tibetan texts, and he really teaches yoga from his depth and his heart and his experience in both of these traditions, both the Ashtanga yoga lineage and culture, but also with his heart that is truly of a Buddhist origin, maybe, perhaps a past life. And so today we're talking about the death process, the Bardo, the psychedelic experience, healing through psychedelics, healing through moving our consciousness through different realms that are spoken about in the Tibetan Book of the Dead that get classified within this Bardo of transition, and how when we're moving through periods of transition or even just living in this world that is constantly in flux, how we might identify and acknowledge and move through stages of development that are mirrored in our experience, or the experience that the Tibetan Book of the Dead writes about or speaks about in the Tibetan tradition of the soul moving out of the body and into a new body, this life after death process. So I know you're going to love this conversation, because who doesn't love a good philosophical, psychedelic, political, yoga conversation? And you'll get to hear all about how John is teaching and practicing now Vajra Yoga, which is very similar to Ashtanga yoga, but kind of weaving together the influences that he has learned through Buddhist traditions and Buddhist practices, and how you can learn more about what he's doing and working with him in New York City. If you're ever there, be sure to look him up. A quick note before we jump into this conversation with Dr. John Campbell. All of us, especially John, had a very deep connection to Dr. Robert Thurman. Russell and I had the honor and privilege of studying with him separately at different times in our lives, in different rooms. And he is someone who has always been very close to our hearts. And of course, for our dear friend, John Campbell, he was a mentor and a friend. This conversation was recorded just a few days before Dr. Robert Thurman passed away on June 16th. And it came as a shock to all of us that he would leave his body so soon. He was dearly loved, and he will be deeply missed.
Welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. This is your host, Harmony Slater.
Hi.
I am your co-host, Mr. Harmony Slater. We were just talking to our friend John about the circumstances in which I had an existential crisis or a spiritually emergent crisis and took to Tibetan Buddhism. John, you were just telling us about smoking toad venom.
I was about to tell you a little bit about that. I'm a neophyte in it. Absolutely. I've actually experienced it twice myself, but I was going to tell you that just the circumstances around that, especially the first time, and it very much was like, as I've heard, ayahuasca ceremonies described, of course, the reverence for the substance and the molecule and its potential is so foregrounded. And this makes me think a lot about Tibetan Buddhism, but we can get there. The beauty of this particular event, and it really was an event, was like 24 hours under the sort of guidance care of a shaman from Mexico. That's what they referred to him as. That's that's how he understands himself. So it wasn't in a particular tribal affiliation or anything, but a shaman. He does that work, and assisted by a couple of my friends. And throughout the course of this 24 hours, first everybody prepared, I think, for at least a week, maybe two beforehand, with certain dietary restriction and
La dieta.
And show up. I didn't know anybody else who was attending, except for, of course, my wife was with me. And so Claude was there too. And you're dressed in white. And the ceremony began with administering something called kambu, which is actually toad venom, right?
Yeah.
And the whole thing was, you're explained to you, you're going to drink a lot of water, you're going to get violently ill, which I'm terrified of. I'm like you, Russell. I'm like such a lightweight. I mean, I'm just like, all the things, nausea and vomiting is like, I'll do anything to avoid that.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate discomfort, right? I'm a sucker for comfort. And so it went down exactly as advertised. You're drinking huge amounts of water, a couple of liters, and very quickly, this is a very, very, it's just amazing, the pharmacopoeia, just that side of it, if that's the right word, came around and nicked you on the spine with I guess it was like a sharp, I don't even know what it was, pit of razor blade maybe, and administered this paste along the spine.
Oh, fantastic. I've seen that in Hamilton Morris's documentaries. That's a very interesting way to do it. We simply smoked the 5-MeO and
no, this wasn't the 5-MeO.
Oh, that was the kombu that they did that. Oh, yeah. We did see that in our ayahuasca ceremony as well. So a little nick and then application.
Nick, application, and then you just start, at a certain point, you're just retching, and then it's pouring out of you, and they encourage you to keep drinking water. It keeps pouring out of you, and maybe that, the whole process is less than 2 hours, but maybe a full hour, and you are clean. If
Spent.
you're ever going to be clean, you're clean. And
Yeah.
there starts to be this amazing, and now that I'm talking about it, I'm really curious to know. At first, it's really, you get to a point where it's just pure water that's pouring.
Hmm.
Hmm.
But then it starts to come up with something deeper, something just, I don't know if that means it's bile. I don't know, but
It,
it's some kind of sediment.
they might describe it in shamanic circles as le flema. And le flema is coming up to kind of give you power. I've heard it
Mm.
described that way in Stephen
Wow.
Breyer's book, Singing to Plants, that this is the shaman's origin of his spiritual power, is the bringing up of this phlegm. And then you want to maintain that phlegm by taking the medicine 2 or 3 times a week. And then you maintain your ability to speak to plants and do the healing.
Right, right. And I heard that some people, to do this is their main, practice. But
Mm-hmm.
then after sort of a brief rest, again, maybe an hour of rest, this small group regathered, and one by one, we're in a circle, and then one by one, in the center of the circle, one person would be helped to smoke the bufo. And
Can I just ask, was it bufo or was it the synthetic 5-MeO?
it was bufo.
Okay.
Yeah, it was definitely bufo. And that also makes me wonder how, they would have known how to dose it and so forth. This can't be very precise, but
It
many,
is. For a big dose, you would do 6 milligrams.
They crystallize it and
They
then they
crystallize
measure
it and
that.
they
right. It
measure
seemed
that
it
out.
was like this little like pasty crystals, something
Yeah, yeah,
that was in a,
yeah.
you ingested, and then you were guided in some prayers, and then prayers would be followed by, smoking. And then that experience is so completely ego dissolving. I mean, I think that's the only way you can refer to it as, and then that itself is, I mean, I personally experienced it, to be honest, like, as very terrifying, and I
Hmm.
went down into it in a very terrified place, which then, I don't know, it was spatial as well. I could not see, there was no visual contact with the world at that point. But then I started to, it started to level out. I think the sort of descent, the sense of settling
Hmm.
in, kind of it tapered off a little bit, and to a point where I was able to tune into I can hear it now, like the singing. There was a lot of singing.
Was it celestial singing you were hearing, or was it singing that they were singing in the room?
They were singing in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are
And playing
icaros
instruments.
that they're presenting to, and that shepherds the experience for you.
Yeah, yeah. And that part, just made me, I can see the faces looking down at me because they're very concerned. I mean, I saw everybody else going through this, and I was deeply concerned for some, thank God I didn't have to go last, I didn't have to
Yeah.
watch everybody. But
Hmm.
coming out of that, I felt a great sense of, I mean, it's indescribable, I guess, a bit fragile, but deeply connected. And then watching, these other people go through it was just so amazing to see the range of experiences. There were people who really looked like they were struggling to just expel some kind of like deep hatred, deep,
Mm,
deep pain.
yeah.
So that was just, like I said, indescribable. But then later in the evening, then again, after the rest, then there was the conclusion of the ceremony was a big dose of psilocybin. and,
Oh.
and this integration period, and I have to say, that's like my one kind of contribution to this, because it was, I guess, kind of unique. First of all, you have to have 24 hours that you can block off for this. But that integration period of a powerful, strong, 4 grams or, of
Mhm.
mushrooms or something, where you are having a
4 grams.
like a strong, heavy
Oh.
dose of psilocybin
Mhm.
with a lot of music, and just settling in for the evening. And that was by far the most beautiful psychedelic experience I ever had. And it was very beautiful to see my wife, and she was very freed by that. It was coming out of a pretty difficult time in my life as well. A lot of struggle, and just plain old plain old addiction, plain old good old fashioned alcoholism. I don't know, that was still a little while ago. I had one smaller experience like that with the Bufo since then. But I think what's so amazing about it, and I don't recommend, this is not a recommendation, like that's the last thing I guess, I don't know, maybe you feel differently. I feel like it's very, very, it's so, let's see, it just seems like it could really be dangerous to somebody, I mean, I know a lot of people are much more upbeat about, it's fine, these substances will take care of you. But the problem is there has to be the follow-up. There has to be this integration. And I felt that integration for me was the most supportive and essential part of it. It's really the essential part of it. It's almost like putting you back together. And it reminded me immediately of, I'd like to hear more what you say, but reminded me immediately of some of the principal idea of in Vajrayana of using the death process as a kind of a template for dissolving ego, but then re-establishing identity on the basis of wisdom and compassion. And then if you don't choose to do that, you're going to get what you get. You're going to merge into the world. And I think a small version of that is that it's like we always are getting what we put in. We open our eyes. We don't think we're collaborating or contributing, but we're just making it up as we're making our worlds. So that's probably the biggest powerful thing, comes through that whole psychedelic experience, how much you are involved in the process of world making,
I know Harmony has something that she wants to say. I just wanted to jump in that one of the things that we're learning about in our studies, like with Harrison Morris's videos, is it's really interesting. And what you've described is a really beautifully set up organization. One of the things that happens and why it's so effective for addiction and healing is that in your brain, the serotonin 2A receptors are taking in the psychedelic as a faux serotonin. So instead of like with MDMA, where you deplete and produce an enormous amount of serotonin in a short while, this floods your system with an imitation or a large group of mimicked serotonin that leaves you flooded with love versus a dopamine, which floods you with a sense of self. It's like, oh, I just won something. Flooded with love for all beings, and that's one of the enormous, I think with that enormity of love is helping break out of a very kind of selfish cycle.
Well, also developing self-compassion for yourself, like love for self, because ultimately we can't break out of, addiction, the cycle of addiction is you feel shame for using, that creates self-loathing, which creates more using. And then you're stuck in that cycle. And the only way to break that is through self-compassion, love, forgiveness, and all of those beautiful qualities that you were just talking about.
That's where I ended up with that feeling of more a willingness to engage in self-acceptance and self-love. And since then, that's been, I wish I could say like, oh, that was perfect from that time on. I was like completely on board with self-love
you just start working.
Then it's like basically just to kind of orients you in this particular way. And I still find that to be such a difficult part of being the person in the world that I want to be is those, basically the lack of self-love, which the part of your mind is telling you that is the one thing that you do not deserve because whatever, even if you're well-intentioned, it's like you're stuck in this self-referential trap. And I've had some very wonderful teachers in the last few years, namely Robert Thurman, who have been just very lucky to spend loads of time with him in the last like 5 years, and the Tibetan physician, Dr. Nida Chinakthang, who is also a practitioner of traditional Tibetan medicine, but he's also, a Vajrayana teacher in the tradition that he's part of. It's very similar. It's not exactly the Nyingma tradition, but it's quite overlapped with it. And his pretty consistent message is seeking, all realizations ultimately have to have this foundation of self-love. So many of our practices then start to become self-care, you know. I actually, speaking of, introducing woo into the conversation, is that, I mean, I just didn't know until recently how incredibly hostile I am to the idea, for either dismissive when other people, are trying to engage in some kind of like self-care and self-love, and actually hostile to it in myself. It's painful to think about.
Wow.
Really.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know why. It's not like I didn't get hugged enough,
Yeah, these patterns are deep and sometimes lifetime patterns and maybe
Yeah,
past
exactly.
lifetime patterns
No
as
doubt.
well.
Generational.
No doubt. Yeah.
Just get told to get up off the floor, and your knee
Right.
gets scraped. You get told that enough times, and he's like, "Well, I'm being weak right now for
Right.
being."
Right. Absolutely. Bringing up Dr. Nita is interesting. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's very aware that his students, of course, are coming from this world where now psychedelics have penetrated into all aspects of culture, and probably not always in a helpful way. But I completely agree with you. There's no issue of it being a gateway drug or that it's at all addictive, because you give somebody 10 hours of an LSD trip, it's just simply not something that they're going to race out and do again. If they are
No.
mentally unbalanced, they may engage in some kind of self-destructive behavior, and that, it's just going to happen.
And there's a concern for 18 to 19, 25-year-old men who may be predisposed to schizophrenia. A psychedelic experience can unlock it, but then so could any stressful experience.
Yeah, totally. Any stressful experience. To bring it around to the yoga talk, it's obvious to me why Ashtanga yoga, which I encountered like you both in this very pure form, and I say pure meaning that there was no real commercial.
Yeah.
Yoga wasn't really like a big commercial thing.
No.
And you always are so receptive to something according to its set and setting. And the set and setting of being in India, you just felt so completely connected, I think, through the way that our teacher at the time himself was just deeply connected to a world that gave me like the structure in which to start to experience and inhabit this energetic body. And for me, the limitation of it always, from very early on, was that because of I wasn't so deeply connected, say, to like the Brahmin tradition, although I did learn Sanskrit and everything. Maybe I just didn't feel like I needed any I don't know, belief system for it to go within. That seemed to be part of the project. It was like you need to open up to a meaningful structure of purpose that you find and that's appropriate for you. And I don't know, I had all sorts of ideas about why Pattabhi Jois did or didn't talk about that at the time, partly that he couldn't, partly that it was just like, oh yeah, you just do this thing and it automatically straightens you out. But meanwhile, I was more interested in going and studying with the Buddhists.
So with the psychedelic experience, one thing that's come into my awareness is like this vast amount of internal energy that gets released when you open up into this sort of transcendental psychedelic state. And that inner energy is within you, right? It's not like the psilocybin or DMT isn't giving you that energy. It's actually just opening up something that's already existing within you.
But serotonin is an energizer.
Yeah, but it's helping to unlock something that's within your system already. It's not like you're increasing your energy through the substance. It's just like opening the door so that your innate intelligence starts to like open up and that energy unleashes in your body in some way and in your mind, and that creates certain effects.
Neuroplasticity and all of that.
And I'm curious because one thing that's sort of like speaking to, it's not an experience for everyone, but one thing that I've been thinking about with the yoga practices is that in my understanding, the asana, the only real benefit of doing asana is to create, and I think Hatha yoga also points to this as well. And since you're a scholar in these things, you can talk about it. And Buddhism also does too, is to create the diamond body. And what is a diamond but like an unbreakable vessel, like something that is
Right.
strong, the strongest substance we know of, right? And so to create a vessel that is strong, that can hold the energy, that like that unlocking of the energy. And what is Kundalini but unlocking that innate internal energy within your
Right.
system? And if you don't have a vessel that can contain it, well, things maybe can go a little haywire.
Sure.
But I feel like the asana practice is really just about creating a strong vessel to unlock this energy. And the thing that I've been curious about is I feel like so many people in our Ashtanga tradition are just like obsessed with creating this vessel and are never unlocking the energy. And part of me feels like that's what attracted you to Buddhism, because Buddhism also talks a lot about like doing the chanting and the meditation and gives you other practices that help to unlock this energy, because asana itself, in my mind and understanding and experience, isn't going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. It's not really well known, but it's pretty good sort of model or speculation historically about how you get the development of, asana practices and the use of the body as an essential tool. And then that gets hybridized with the tantric traditions of experiencing the deity directly in some way, but that those are actually somehow maybe different strands of practice that people, I mean, the traditional biographies of the Buddha, which aren't contemporaneous, maybe, but they're 2,000 years old. They were maybe a few hundred years after the passing of the Buddha. They describe all of them in his spiritual journey involved mortification of the body, and that was exactly what he was being told to do. But there, the emphasis is really on transcending the body, because the body was like the key suspect in the essential problem of samsara. This is the basis on which you feel attachment and aversion and craving. And having practiced that, he very quickly dispenses with that, right? As being, although what's really interesting in the stories, if you do a little more narrative analysis, is that in all of the stories, right, he gets to this near death point, right, where his body is just about to that expression, give up the ghost. He's skin and bones. He's like, they don't really represent this so much in the Tibetan, but in Southeast Asia, you can find these amazing statues of that, right? And he's withered. And then the key moment in the narrative on one level is where, due to the intervention, which is completely, what's the right word? Just happens to happen, but it's just part of the story, is that the girl who's going to propitiate a naga to give offerings for fertility, right? And she's like, oh, here's the naga, like is this like withered husk of a being like next to the tree. And she makes her offering. This is the Sujata, and it makes the offering of the porridge, like milk, which he then recognizes with his final, because it says that in the story, and this again, I'm like hybrid, I'm making a composite of different stories, but the story is that he's exhausted the body, but he also is thinking, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to renounce air. Oh,
right.
That's going to be it.
He's a true breatharian, and now he's going the full, I'm going to
even eliminate breath. Yeah.
You keep sort of whittling away at everything that you need. And, note in our tradition, one of our traditions, the Krishnamacharya tradition, it's always sort of boasted these amazing things that somebody could do, like stop their heart.
Yeah.
And I always would wonder about that, like, okay, interesting. Why? Why would you want to do that? But anyway, so, she makes this offering. He then takes the sustenance, and it allows his mind to come back online. And then he goes through this process that we now still is the template of understanding in meditation, how it's understood, at least in the Buddhist tradition, was that he first establishes the calm abiding, complete single-pointed, initially based upon his breath, brings his attention to respiration, the mind settles, and then goes into full single-pointed concentration, with which, that's not the end of the story, with which he then examines and thoroughly searches for the self, for this supposed self. So this idea that I have when I close my eyes or when I experience something, that there is like I'm located somewhere, maybe behind my eyes or in my head. There's some me that is having these experiences, right? And then I'm, that they're arising. And that's where I think the diamond first becomes the crucial metaphor, because, the word diamond is so important here, Vajra. But earlier, the early tradition, the ancient tradition, which then comes in to become part of the sacrifice, is that Vajra is a weapon. It's a symbol of power. It's Indra's powerful weapon. And then it gets appropriated as a symbol of this powerful diamond drill with which you drill down and to find the thing that, if it were there, and I'm going to this is the balls out approach. I am going to find it. If it is there, I'll find it. But then also accepting that if you do not find it, if you can prove an absence to yourself, or you cannot affirm a presence, then you are left with the reality that you are not in unrelated self, in intrinsically static with which you relate to everything, that instead you are a dependently existing, a relative being, and that your existence is entirely interdependent. So presumably they don't go into detail in the biographies, because they just say he goes through the 3 watches of the night, where first he sees all his past lives. So this insight first into selflessness allows him to have a perspective on this interconnected continuity of mind, which then gets elaborated much more in especially Mahayana tradition, where it's made, well, in actually all the traditions, the famous stories of feeding the body to the hungry tigress, or
the early incarnation of the Buddha.
The early incarnations, which then eventually gets developed into this idea that the Buddha in his past lives himself takes on the bodhisattva commitment.
And those tiger cubs became his first students.
It's amazing, amazing. Second watch of the night, he's able to then view all of samsara and everyone's lives. He's this sort of omniscience, whatever that means. And then third watch, he's awake. And he touches the ground, and because he's challenged by that gesture, the boom, they call it bhumi sparsha mudra. So when you see the Buddha, sometimes he's like this, sometimes he's touching, and the touching is what they call bhumi sparsha, or touching the earth, and the earth itself affirms this awakening and this enlightenment. And then what I love too in all these stories is that he's like, that is so cool. Nobody is going to believe me. And so he remains there for 47 days. He's savoring his enlightenment. And it's only because Brahma himself comes and begs him and petitions him. He says, really, it will be worthwhile. Please, you have to come and teach. So he's like, okay, that sounds good. He first goes and teaches his mother, who is in heaven. And then he comes and so the whole thing seems to me like all these elements of these stories. So it's not exclusive to the Buddhist tradition. There's amazing stories of how the realization of one's sort of imposter status, that you are absolutely not anything that you thought you were. And so all this work you're putting into being that person seems to be ridiculous at a certain point. But then that is this total sort of breakdown and dismantling, i.e. 5-MeO, strip it down. And if then you're rising into a new potential, which the key there has to be compassion. It has to be. Because without that, you are left. I'm not even sure that's the part where, we were starting, you were talking about, asking about Vajra body.
Yeah.
It looks like there are traditions that really did believe if you could make the body indestructible, you could become immortal. So Hatha Yoga was about creating, there's this friend and scholar in England, James Mallinson, and Jim has studied these early Hatha Yoga texts, and is really clear that some of the ideas about using the body to access this Vajra body reality was something that probably started in the Buddhist tradition and then was imported. So I have such limitless, endless gratitude for what the Ashtanga experience has provided me, because by the time I started like encountering ideas, starting to learn about Tibetan Buddhism in particular, I was like, yeah, that checks out. The idea that in a sense, having this stability to just even sit comfortably and not be distracted is kind of an important prerequisite. But I guess that's my last word on it, is that it turns out it's a prerequisite.
Yeah, it turns out, in fact, it's super helpful.
Yeah.
I want to bring the conversation deeply into this tradition, the Tibetan tradition. Maybe it's informed by the bone tradition and these notions of the Bardo. If I could just set you up with the context for the question as briefly as I can, is I started Ashtanga yoga because I realized that I was profoundly unsteady by I'm now adverse to calling it a bad trip, like a King Kong bad trip from when I was a teenager. I'm now looking at it as a profound learning that happened to me. But I went into Ashtanga yoga after that to heal, to find steadiness, and to somehow get my mind right, to cleanse my mind. I was just absolutely terrified of the possibility of my mind. I was realizing that any sort of THC would bring me right back into it.
Right.
And I was terrified of it for about 30 years of Ashtanga yoga practice until I did the ayahuasca a few months back and realized what it was that I had been terrified of. I was terrified of dying. And I had relived the conditions of this is a bit woo, but I had relived the conditions of being high on cocaine in the womb, of being terrified, locked in a cage, held by the throat and hyperactive and being totally freaked out. And suddenly I saw, oh, that's what I was being shown by psychedelics. I came away from that realizing that I wanted to understand how to practice for the Bardo, because I suddenly realized that, like Sogyal Rinpoche said in the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, that death is molten chaos. And you're going to have to be strong, and you're going to have to steady your mind in the process of death. And suddenly it's like, oh, I thought death was going to be cool. I thought it was going to be like, I'm going to get pulled into the light. Everything's going to be cool. I'm an ethical, nice person. Everything's going to be fine. I'm not going to have a difficult time with the wrathful asuras showing me just how fucking terrifying everything can be for an infinite amount of time. Because when you're dead, there is no time. This could be infinite. I can't do 15 minutes on DMT. And you're telling me I'm going to be in DMT infinitely? Oh, that's not cool. So now I'm very interested in this Bardo experience, John, and anything you can help us with. First question I would ask, do you think, this seems implausible to me, that Gautama, what's his name? Gautama Siddhartha was the first one that human beings offered to liberation. It seems like maybe he was just he constructed a template, but come on, we're like 100, 300,000, a million years into this as Homo sapiens. He's not the first.
Since you asked the question, I'll give it a try. I mean, the last week I was with an incredible group of teachers at Menla, this retreat center. Bob was there. The wonderful Krishnadas was there with his band and sharing his experiences with Neem Karoli Baba and wonderful Maharaji, and Nina Rao was there, and Chandra Easton, who is a wonderful teacher, more than Nyingma tradition, and who I'm leaving out. And Michelle Lowe made an appearance, which is extraordinary, and she's a wonderful teacher in these traditions, similar to me, with a lot of background in, I guess we'll call it modern Ashtanga yoga, postural yoga. She was Richard and Mary's student, I think, mostly, but then became far more involved in Tibetan yoga systems. So this is a cast of characters, but not to leave out, relevant here is Dr. Robbie Svoboda. And Dr. Robbie is like, he's just the most skilled speaker. He's obviously very brilliant, but he's just an incredible raconteur. But more than that, the thing that I think it makes me love India so much, that was probably the biggest takeaway, is what an incredible gift to have this experience of India, because it is a place where stories are still alive. They like truly live. The amount of devotion that goes, and it's on a super dark side too, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
Stories about caste and hierarchy and
Mhm.
certainly patriarchy. The Ravi's forward point is that he is such a master of stories, and
Mhm.
the ancient India, of course, practically a master of Jyotish and Ayurveda. But
Oh, wow.
it's the way that he talks about ancient India, which then goes back well before Gautama, the current Buddha, is that there's no question in his presentation that there were such enlightened beings that, like, the rishis were able to, although what we saw historically created as this fire sacrifice, which is a very, very simple arrangement, by the way, no matter how extremely complex fire ceremony is. At its basic level, it is exactly what you saw in with the ancient Israelites and in the temple. You're basically telling God, please do good stuff for us and don't
Mhm.
fuck us off,
Mhm.
because you're making offerings, and then that
Yeah.
takes place, and the Zoroastrians take that up. But his point was that, yes, you allow people to do that because people will be simple-minded like that, and that sort of exchange, that economy of,
Mhm.
it's almost an extortion racket, right? We'll make these offerings of valuable substances so that our progeny doesn't die in
Yeah.
childbirth. But the rishis understood it in the subtle way, in how it connects to the astral realm. They were connecting the astral realm through the sacrifice. And so then the question is, so what's the big deal with, say, the Buddha or the advent of Christ? And there are two answers to me. And one is that there are moments undoubtedly where our collective karma makes it possible to accept the appearance of one of these transcendently enlightened beings. Sometimes the conditions are just right. Because if it requires that, you have to imagine, if these beings are like so completely compassionate, they know exactly what we need, then why aren't they fucking doing their job? What's going
Mhm.
on here? The service in this place is terrible.
Mhm.
The
Um,
service in this place is
Mhm.
terrible.
and so, like, if I think about, okay, there are these enlightened beings, but then where is that connecting to the everyday experience? And I think that it is, always the ground is being laid, and it's important to make the conditions just be essentially correct. And in the Buddhist tradition, Shakyamuni Buddha appears in the world. This is a very rare thing. The notion of the Buddha bodies, right? You've heard this idea of the Trikaya, the three bodies of the Buddha.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So the enlightened state is understood in the Buddhist tradition. In fact, we are all understood as, in a sense, it's a very helpful map, is the three Buddha bodies. And by the way, just a side note. So your idea of death, which you described so beautifully, it's so Woody Allen, and I'm the same, which is, what do we really want? We want oblivion. We're scared.
Yeah, yeah.
And our idea of real comfort is just it's gone, like everything's gone. So the realization that begins with, oh God, there's some kind of continuity,
Yeah.
that's essential, but it's also completely terrifying.
Sure.
It's completely
Yeah.
terrifying. So Buddha bodies then being Dharmakaya, which is reality itself, the nature of enlightenment. The Sambhogakaya, which is in one sense, the subjective experience of enlightenment that a Buddha itself has. And so we can only represent that. We can put that in in an image and so forth, multi-armed deity, but this is the deity experiencing itself, where these deities dwell in pure lands, and there's all sorts of, in a way, theology around that. And then finally, the emanation body, which is the Nirmanakaya. That's a fully enlightened Nirmanakaya, Shakyamuni Buddha, so rare, or Jesus Christ, for example.
Mhm.
But then, according to Bob, this starts to produce limitless numbers of people who are getting enlightened all the time, actually. It's not like this one and done. It's part of a particular narrative that is helpful as a beginning point. But his view of this and the Tibetan tradition's view of this is that, in fact, enlightenment is it's not exactly common, but it is happening all the time that people are, and sometimes they will write, they express it and we see, oh, okay, Patanjali, Maharishi. Patanjali was an enlightened being. He himself was, in very similar to a Buddha. So when I step back from that, I guess I get really concerned to make that distinction. I'm like, that's a real Buddha, and this is like I'm thinking of it in D&D terms. Like, what are your
quasi deity?
Yeah, and what are your hit points? So forth. But the point ultimately
has a disc, has a magic sword. This one doesn't.
Right. What are your special powers? But what matters is its implications for me. So I think that the idea that enlightenment's even possible is incredibly, not to say that I can even conceive of what that is like, but in a sense, again, the fear of dying, and that's all about the fear of the extinction of this limited sense of me. Who is it that's actually afraid? Well, I know exactly who that is. That's this person that I'm deeply familiar with and seems to continually cause the problems. And it also seems to be the locus of what I feel as what's really good and happy and so forth. But that's where you really, the Buddha Dharma, it's like Dharma means to uphold something. The Buddha takes that to, it upholds us sort of social norms in a certain sense, right? Kama, artha, no.
Yeah, kama, artha, dharma, moksha.
Dharma, right. Kama, artha, dharma. But the moksha is a later addition. Moksha is a later addition. And so that original idea was just like upholding appropriate social norms so that you let the father be the father and fulfill that role. And, we know who we are and everything. But the idea of Dharma is that it's what upholds your true reality. It's what upholds, because the word means to uphold from that root word, dhar, to hold. So we align ourselves, I guess, somehow with, and I love that idea I experienced it even through doing the yoga practice of feeling more aligned, feeling more at ease in the world. But that being said, it took me a long time to figure out that it was a very incomplete teaching. I wouldn't go so far as our friend David, who goes, like, they didn't know how to teach asana. I kind of have no opinion on that.
That's curious. Like, I think there's a bit of a trend amongst yoga practitioners who have been in the Ashtanga lineage for a while or have had a Ashtanga practice. And I mean, you've seen this in different people, not just David's post that he made talking about how Pattabhi Jois and Sharat Jois didn't know how to teach yoga, which, I mean,
they knew how to judge yoga.
What do you call yoga? I guess is you got to get down to real definitions, or even asana. I mean, they had a different approach to teaching asana. They didn't teach asana like Iyengar. They didn't pull out their rulers and straps and blocks. But for me, Pattabhi Jois always taught asana. Actually, the way he taught asana, I love. I teach asana that way. I think probably you do as well, which is like the inner alignment of your energy. He was looking at your energy body. He wasn't looking at your physical body. And to me, that's what yoga is about. It's not about where your feet are, where your hands are, or like this muscle or that muscle, or how do I contract this one and release that one? And all these questions about the body to me seem like actually completely off the mark when it comes to true yoga teaching, which is about your spirit, your mind, and your energetic field, both internally and externally. And like, that's what Pattabhi Jois looked at, I'm pretty sure, because I was in the room with him, as were you, and he was energetically, but like energetically, he would adjust you. He would adjust you with a look, and you'd feel your energetic field shift, and something in your body would change because your body is the most dense part of your energetic field. It was amazing. He wasn't concerned about the physicality of it. So that's just my argument against that whole, like, they didn't know how to teach asana. It's like, well, what are you using asana for? Are you using it to build like your physical body? Or are you using it to connect to what you can't see the invisible realm that's within you, which is, to me, the whole point of yoga.
Yeah, it makes me think there certainly are texts that are left with us, including kind of up to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. There's a sense in which the body is going to become made into this diamond body or this Vajra body, and then it's going to become immortal. The Amrita Siddhi, becoming immortal. So it does beg the question, exactly like you're saying. If you're saying they didn't teach yoga well, now there's a lot of things to criticize for sure.
Yeah.
Plenty of things to criticize. But the idea that they didn't teach yoga right then begs the question, well, what do you think this yoga is supposed to end up doing? And if it is supposed to mainly be or exclusively be some kind of like therapeutic thing, exactly the right thing for your hips and so forth, then I would certainly buy it that, Ashtanga yoga is not like the most sophisticated approach to that. There's plenty of things that seem to work better. So for me, I think it broke through and created a sensitivity to energetic reality that we are living in constantly that I'm not sure I could have produced otherwise. I just couldn't think my way into it. I'm a tough case. I'm a very slow learner. I mean, anyway, it's a lot easier to sit back and like critique and everything, but there is absolutely a trend in people experiencing some buyer's remorse. Let's call it that. You've just been doing that for a very long time. What do you think, Russell?
I totally agree that there's some people experiencing buyer's remorse. Absolutely. Many people I know who are my age complain about the home or the education they didn't buy with that money. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. And I join them. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in a part of me, I'm like, every time I have a little ego contraction, I mean, at any single moment, if I would just get the fuck over myself, I think I could probably be like the most extraordinary person. And I keep waiting for that to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm ever optimistic. But I think that it's such a commonplace observation that yoga has the potential to work, as exactly as you said, to open you to the subtle energetic body, knowledge about the system, the idea that you have a gross physical body, that it has this interface with the subtle. There is such a thing as a subtle body, and that ultimately there is even a super subtle body. And the alignment of those three complexes, some of them are built on form, feeling, sensations, perceptions, conception, and consciousness, like the five aggregates set up. Then there's the subtle body of nadi, prana, bindu, and chakra, and the super subtle drop, which is the big eye-opening thing to me, is in the Vajrayana traditions, is they acknowledge something which really is basically the soul. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. There is a soul, the indestructible drop at the heart center, and this is something that is what passes from life to life. But in a certain sense too, the root cause of samsara is ignorance. Is part of what we're doing is, it's ironic, you're strengthening the body, you're like being more capable so that you can let go of it, so that you can let it be.
Forgive me, Harmony. I've got a very limited time with John. I have some various critical questions I need to ask him before we get off the show. And I know you have some more kind of practical things about being alive, but I've gone through the Moonlight Mile. I've seen the red light that comes from looking at the sun with eyes closed. I've seen the moment of Pure Land. Okay, for maybe just a glimpse. Maybe it's just a fish out of water. Maybe I get 3 whole fucking days of that fish. Amazing. So then I'm fully in the Bardo. I'm experiencing great remorse about the people who are dancing about and very happy with my death, because I'm now telepathic. I can go anywhere in the world instantaneously. I come to terms with being like, oh, fuck, I'm dead. Now there's scores and scores of devas and asuras who show me all kinds of wondrous and horrifying things, and it becomes so intense, in fact, that I'm actually considering rebirth to get the fuck away from these people. And so beings. And so there are a variety of different lands that, if I'm full of folly, I might go into the animal realm or into the wrathful ghost realm or the hell realm. But in this moment, it's possible to achieve liberation by avoiding the draw into the copulation of what might be my parents. It's like, just avoid that energy, bro. Just like sit back in yourself and remain firm, be strong, as Geshe Lobten told me when I asked him the same question at the Tibetan temple. Just be strong. You'll be fine.
Wait, so he gave you the Nancy Reagan just say no, like
just say no
when it comes to rebirth?
Just say no to
I
copulation.
have a feeling he was leaving something out there.
So just say no to copulation. And so why do all of these lamas keep being reborn as reiterations of themselves? Why do they keep doing it? Why don't they just peace out and say, take the liberation? Why? How am I going to have any chance at this if all of these lamas keep coming back and keep getting sucked into human form?
Right. Well, according to the Mahayana Buddhism, the presence of these beings, it really is. It's not like proof positive that you're stuck with compulsively, constantly being reborn in samsara. For all you know, those are angels. They are actually, in fact, according to like the mind training practices that they taught, that's called Lojong, which is a whole tradition in early Tibetan Buddhism that comes from India, though, is that every person that you encounter is potentially an enlightened being. You don't know, because what does an enlightened being do? What's the nature of the whole scheme? Well, theoretically, it's a person who, having made this initial altruistic aspiration to achieve awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. Why for their sake? So that they could serve them, so that they could help them. They could, in some way, help them to realize themselves. And this gets you into this weird conundrum that, okay, so if a bodhisattva deliberately is capable of embodying and reincarnating and so forth, why would they do it at all? Well, that's simple, because they're out of compassion and they would want to, interact with you. But the problem is that nobody is a card-carrying bodhisattva. It's inscrutable to someone who is dense and deluded like myself. And the reason why also everyone is your guru, everyone is potentially an enlightened being, is that it's on the basis of your interaction with them that you are generating karma. You are accumulating karma. So that's why the Lojong poems say things like, the person who harms me, not exactly harms me, but basically somebody who causes me trouble, they are the basis on which I can practice the perfections, what are called the bodhisattva perfections. What is it? Shanti, Virya, Dhyana, Samadhi, and Prajna. Or what's the first one?
Sila, right?
Sila is one of them, but the first one is Shanti, is patience or forbearance. And so there's within the Mahayana the idea that it's quite similar to aspects of the 12 steps, the AA 12 steps, that you have this opportunity. In fact, you have to engage with people and start to see the causality that brought it to the point where you perceive them as your enemy, and they're your enemy because they're causing you distress. And then you begin to see, okay, here are the causes that could have caused them distress. And then it's very practical. It's like, well, if it's really over the top, maybe just avoid them for the moment, because you might not be able to convert that. But without that experience of genuine compassion for this suffering being, and seeing the cause, the dependently created conditions that has produced this particular arrangement between you and they and the rest, you would not start to be able to see. You again, this is just another aspect of letting go of a rigid sense of self. The reason why you can't just do it with airy slogans like just let go of self, because the very nature of the fabric of reality is built upon our core sense of identity. And this is why the psychedelics are so incredibly, where did that come from? Some substance that can actually suddenly dissolve that. Because it, like you said, Harmony, it is not something that's being added on. It is simply removing something. It's removing your filter and your ability to basically apply your predictive models, your priors, where everything is going to conform to what you expect it to be. And that's how we know the world. That means we don't know the world. We don't know anything. I'm not sure I do a very good job of explaining or even understanding it, but I think that's where I'm at just as a living being, but particularly in the yoga practices, is trying to give people a chance to experience their energetic body and be more in tune with it. I've been learning the Tibetan yoga systems. They do a similar thing. They just happen to do it a little more directly. As a relative, what I've been practicing asana for a really long time. And I think that that's maybe I'm a quick learner because of that. But again, it only provides as much as you can also start to apply your critical insight that is necessary. So when you talk about these Bardo stages, right? And it's interesting that you actually experience them, but you go through the moonlit space of the mind, the subtle, which is the initial subtle stage of the mind.
Yeah.
There are certain
To fire
and then fire, etc., and water and
consciousness.
fire. So you get from moonlit space to sunlit space to blackout, dark lit space where there is
Yeah.
actually no. But then this fourth is the arising of the nature of mind, which
Pure
is
land. Rigpa.
not Pure Land, though. It's not, because that's still reifying it into kind of a state, like the
Ah,
whole goal, not the goal, but the ultimate enemy and what keeps us bound up into the problem of as suffering beings is our compulsive reification of everything. Everything has to become a real thing and a thing that is real from its own side. So the nature of clear light mind is, described conventionally as it's clear and knowing. It's completely boundless and it has this nature of knowing. So the light that arises in that death dissolution process at that point is called prabhasvara, which simply means illumination. So it's not directional,
hmm
right? So
It's
sometimes,
not the sunrise coming, it's just
yeah,
light coming.
it's twilight. It's
Yeah.
twilight. That's it. It's like twilight or crépuscule. You speak French, right? Crépuscule.
Oh, you're speaking French?
Yes, yes. So crépuscule is a word that is that pre-dawn light, that it's like
Ah,
gray, and so nothing has a shadow. Everything seems to be illuminated itself. So this is
promiscuous.
the nature of
Okay.
this is the nature of the mind. But then that mind, which arises in the process naturally, you would normally go into the Bardo,
hmm
but it's about familiarizing ourselves with this sort of processes to the point where we can continually bring that back to meditate on the nature
hmm
of things.
Yeah.
Um,
Rather than it being a flash, you can stay there, and then that stillness can then maybe perhaps give you the opportunity to lend yourself to liberation. And again, I ask why anybody wouldn't just go to
Because
liberation.
because there's no place to go.
there's no
Yeah.
place to go,
I beg,
ultimately.
Yeah. Well, I
you
mean,
know,
still, this unfortunate above my pay grade, the the whole discussion of non-duality. Non-duality means different things in different contexts and to different people. Um, the non-duality that is probably associated with earliest Buddhist teachings is the non-duality of being and not being. So things are neither reified as truly existing or not existing. They exist conventionally, but ultimately they are empty. They don't exist. They are selfless. Because the arising of the clear light mind is also potentially extraordinarily blissful experience,
yeah.
right? But in doing so, you also experience other beings as the source of that bliss, and you don't necessarily coming back the post meditative, post aftermath samadhi is that
hmm
all things then will appear as dreamlike. So
Hmm.
that's another really important cognate thing to the psychedelic experience is that you have this opportunity then to see like, oh, like I'm normally in a dream. It's not that the dream
Hmm.
world is like this thing that is antithetical to, but it's actually an aspect of this is actually the way things are. It doesn't mean that you can go to the top of buildings and jump off them because there are constraints within this relative constraints. But learning to experience or just getting familiar with one's own lack of solidity, it's just always necessary. But why you would then choose if you could opt to completely peace out, it's wonderfully put because it's so limited. Your thinking is so limited that you would think that that's an appealing option. It's just
Yeah.
that's just wish casting of something that you and I would do that.
Yeah.
The whole point is that you and I would no longer be you and I.
Yeah.
We
Because
That,
you know why you don't.
go ahead.
I'll tell you why. The reason why you don't just opt out if you're in that pure light mind is because you're love. And love is all that is real in that pure light mind. And love draws you back because of your compassion, because of the love for all beings, for all creation. Love is what would draw you back to be born again.
Just this morning, Harmony remembered all of her previous lives, and we're really pretty excited about it. And
wow.
we're gonna write a book, and we're gonna
Uh,
go on. Who's that German guy, Eckhart Tolle? She's gonna be like him now. I have one last question on this. So, okay, so I have succumbed to the copulation of my new parents. I'm going to be reborn
right.
as a human. My karma dictated a lot of these choices anyway, so I'm like just subject to it. I
Right.
am reborn as my in this one. I asked this question to Geshe-la, the abbot of Jamtse Lingcho, our new temple, and I said, "So, is it geography dependent? Like, if I'm here in Calgary, I'm going to be reborn to some people in Calgary, right? It's like because you keep seeing the lamas get reborn in Tibet to
Right.
Tibetans, but also I said like Geshe-la, there's other planets. Like I could be." Couldn't I just be reborn on Alpha Centauri? Was that not?
Right. What did you say?
It's infinite. There are infinite, unlimited possibilities for your rebirth, which
Right.
then suggested to me that not even this universe. Like
Yeah.
I could be reborn on a planet where all of us have holes in the top of our head.
Right.
Oh,
They still do talk about like how we exist in this six realm set of embodiments.
Mm-hmm.
And that that itself is this vast. We happen to be in this sort of central continent of that and so forth. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has also said a lot of this early stuff that you can't take it as scientific description necessarily. But I don't know what they say about the idea of only six
Mm-hmm.
embodiments or six possible reincarnation types. But anyway, if you entertain that for a second, you say, let's say it's possible to the only two realms that we have direct experience of are, of course, human and animal. And then there are the four others, and the four others are in realms that we don't know what expanse that is.
I beg to differ. You've met Donald Trump. That's a hungry ghost. You've seen him in the
Right,
flesh.
that's true. That's true. That's almost embodied thirst. Yeah, it's so bad. Yeah, so it, I guess a lot of times I come back to the possibility of exactly what these different realms are and how you're going to get to them and whether you should get to them is all very interesting. But what I always keep noticing is that, yeah, but you don't want to do that. Like, oh, there's this form. You could be in like the top four zones of the
Yeah.
form realm. Like, because we're in the desire realm, top four realm, all the Brahmikayika devas
Yeah.
exist in these 16 realms, right? Which
Yeah.
are associated with Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha, so the four
Uh-huh.
immeasurables. So why wouldn't you want to be born there?
Well, you have
Good
no
question.
choice when you're there.
it's
You've
the
got no way
heaven.
to affect anything. Mm.
Exactly. And it is actually a very, very undesirable thing because in order to actually get liberation, you would then be stuck there. So obviously, this is not an everyday concern for some like slop like me, but it does suggest that what's really important is this idea that meditative states themselves, or the different extraordinary states of mind that you experience, maybe on psychedelics, maybe in your daily life, maybe lovemaking, maybe in a state of terrible fear. All of those states, if they are sustained,
It's simultaneous.
they are effectively rebirth in those realms, as if you were reborn in those realms. And so the karma that you are accumulating, because it becomes equivalent. And you can see how, I don't know if this lines up with correct doctrine or anything, but if you just think about, hell realms, it's pretty obvious that some people are living
Yeah,
hell realms.
right now.
For them, it is hellish usually because of mental illness. Everything they see is a source of terror and oppression and so forth.
Yeah.
And so our minds are so incredibly powerful. And I feel like probably I could have started to use some of that enormous energy I had, towards the Ashtanga yoga, learning other methods earlier, maybe. But obviously I couldn't, because I didn't. And
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, right? So I still feel like, unfortunately, I'm just a student, or maybe that's good. I'm still trying to be a student, but I'm trying to always be aware that the quality of my mind is really what is ultimately always going to matter, no matter what happens. And certainly there's nothing that you can't exercise your way out of your being trapped in your ego. You can't earn your way out of being trapped in your ego. But to surrender to the idea that reality at its core is love, and the experience of love can be challenging. To just relax into that, sometimes you need some support. A lot of times you always need support in that. But the only way that you'll ever get that support, the only way you get to those good conditions, is if you try to create them for someone else. You want to be able to, help other people. So that's mainly what motivates my yoga teaching. Is I feel like if I keep sharing these things with other people, that they will keep getting shared with me, that my very slow, gradual learning curve will eventually get me to a place where my practice is able to produce, like I said, a better person to serve. I like to be able to help and serve others and love them. It's very hard to love people. They're not so lovable.
Like you've done, people are challenging at times. But you've done like all of the series of Ashtanga yoga, decades and decades, like what, probably 30 plus years of Ashtanga yoga now.
Yeah.
And you're teaching in New York City, I think.
At the Tibet House.
At the Tibet House, right?
Yes, at Tibet, just Tibet House, yeah.
And in upstate New York.
Yes.
And in upstate still with BB's school there.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because as a certified Ashtanga yoga teacher, and also I went through all of the third series and some of the fourth series, and you've completed fourth series, and I'm sure have done some of fifth series. But like the people who come to me are usually not doing advanced asanas for the most part. Maybe sometimes they're doing third series, but barely at all. They're more like interested in kind of reconnecting to their bodies and like experiencing some of the deeper aspects of yoga. And I feel like that's actually a testament to what I portray yoga as. And I'm very happy to help people reconnect to their bodies and experience their mind and their breath and these deeper aspects of yoga. What are you cultivating there at the Tibet Center? What kind of environment and what do you hope people come to learn or experience from Ashtanga yoga? Because I feel like that's maybe different than what you originally started learning Ashtanga yoga for, how you were taught.
Well, to begin, just to slightly correct that, I really don't see myself as teaching Ashtanga yoga there now at this point. There's still a trickle of students that, they are dedicated to that very fascinating project of the Ashtanga yoga series, which is actually quite unique. There's nothing that I've seen that really kind of it's comparable in terms of developing the body, and the energetics are really, really out there. So some people still like have an interest in that, and I'm kind of trying to like support their effort in that. But more, my main interest and goal with the practice, the yoga practice, is introducing people to, on one hand, using the more basic elements of the Hatha Yoga asana system, so kind of extracting from the series as best I can, and trying to get them to a place where one of two things will happen. They'll either discover that, they leave and find something else that they like to do, but it just gets this sort of process going where they find what really brings joy to them personally in terms of the movement practice. And secondarily, that they then see the potential in these Tibetan yoga systems, which really rely heavily on pranayama. And both of these are still really, really valuable. And it's not like when I say don't teach Ashtanga yoga, it's just that what that requires, I don't actually want to have somebody necessarily spend all of their effort on that. I would like them to be introduced to these other methods alongside. So it's a little bit of a hybrid thing, but really my own longer term goal is that through the work at Tibet House, that we have the opportunity to really have a study institute where people are engaging, people who are already at that sort of level. They've done a fair amount of asana or even experienced the Tibetan yoga stuff. And then they want to go deeper and they want to study the texts. They want to study the traditional sources, which then in turn, if depending on their inclination, might connect them to a true authority, which I do not consider myself. Like, but a true authority, because one of the things about many of the Tibetan yoga systems is they do really strongly encourage connection to a teacher. It's very hard to like really do this stuff unless you've experienced either a living teacher who's there with you, or, and I think this is a legitimate substitute, the kind of initiatory process that sometimes I think psychedelics can provide. You need to jump ship genetically. You need to kind of completely have the possibility of a radical reset. And that traditionally happens because, you see the guru as enlightenment in person. And that's a very, very powerful thing. What are you actually trying to do is you're trying to radically change your perception of the world and your conception of self. And those things do not budge unless you are like really, really, there has to be some power behind that process. Yeah.
Under vertical sadhana. Yeah, you have to be, or something just like with Eckhart Tolle, just you're on a park bench and you've hit rock bottom and then it arises.
But even people who are like doing, I say even people, but I just associate this with, I'm not talking about effort as in gritting effort. It just needs to be all of you. So like the way that Krishna Das sings about or talks about Maharaji, or the way that anybody like who is, with Maharaji, their heart is just he is always, always there, and their heart is totally far out. This is now 20 years ago, but the first time I attended any kind of real Vajrayana teaching was on this tantric practice that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is teaching. And he spends like the first several days teaching, basic non-tantric stuff about what's called the three principles of the path, which is a very famous structuring of the Dharma by the great Lama Tsongkhapa, the early 15th century, who I spent a lot of time translating with Bob Cope and others. And the three principles are renunciation, meaning it can mean you go for refuge and, actually renounce the world, get rid of your stuff. But it obviously means not just material renouncing. It means renouncing your sense that they can help you, renouncing your sense that the next Amazon buy is really going to set you up and make you feel really good, and that's going to be somehow enduring. You're renouncing that. And then the next, principle is bodhicitta, which is this extraordinary mind of awakening altruism and seeking to fulfill self through compassion. And then the third is understanding reality, understanding emptiness in that case, or however you want to put it, emptiness, God, but seeing that everywhere. And then he teaches on that. He's talking about this 500-year-old text, and he's just weeping. His heart is so full of love for the possibility of what this has for us. So yeah, I'm hoping that our school starts to pick up, and we're teaching some elements of asana, still really helpful. I don't know if you continue to teach any of that. Do you still teach asana?
Yeah, I mostly teach that when I'm traveling. So mostly like workshops or Mysore weeks or retreats. I'll
But they
teach.
come to you for that. Yeah,
Yeah, because I still go to other yoga schools that are heavily teaching that.
I see.
But they always get a little surprise when they come, you know.
Because you're not doing it there.
Yeah, I do
You do
teach. I
all
teach
kinds
the
of stuff.
Mysore and I teach asana in those classes, but my workshops are
So
a lot
weird and
more
tantric and
Yeah,
spinal
in
energetic.
depth about breath and energy and like chanting
yeah.
and mantra and like vibration and frequency and consciousness. And I love like the
Wow.
philosophical teachings, you know, as you do. That's like my
Right.
my heart also is always like, what's the nature of reality? What's your relationship to it? What's your relationship to yourself? How are you
Yeah,
bringing this into your life? Like that, to me,
right.
that's yoga. Like that's
Right.
it. Whether you do asana or go for a run or a swim, is like,
Right.
how are you taking care of your body?
Hmm.
There's some things like I think you said earlier, asanas. I think asana gives you a specific kind of orientation, especially in the Ashtanga practice, around developing discipline and devotion in a way that maybe other types of practices don't necessarily evoke unless you're like
Yeah.
super into it in sort of a niche way.
Mm,
And that element, that discipline, that devotion, that understanding, that creating a boundary, a sacred space for yourself, for your connection to God or consciousness or your body, your breath, your mind,
right.
that requires commitment and time. That it doesn't
Yeah.
just happen because you want it to, but you have to
Yeah.
cultivate something in that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah. It's cultivating things, right? It's
yeah,
wow. Yeah.
yeah, bhavana.
The extraordinary thing about both of you turning your students' attention towards energy or towards the esoterica is that what we used to do, which is the tragedy of Sharat's passing, but also its opportunity, is that we used to develop a student to then go to Mysore. It's
Right.
like work on them,
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
on them.
Right.
It's like now you look like you're about ready to go to Mysore. Like
Right. Right.
we had an easy, low-hanging fruit that divorced us from real yoga. Whenever we had a student that we could have shepherded into Vajrayana yoga or to, studying Tibetan or studying Sanskrit at a deep level or really working on pranayama, we would instead, it's like, we had just that, here, just go to Mysore. But him passing means that all of us are, well, now what do I do with my
Right.
student? Like, well, now we really get into like the real work
Now
of
you get to be
studying.
a teacher.
Now you get to
Yeah.
really be a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
Mhm.
it's like the kind of last reflection on that is maybe the circumstances just have not been set such that I could I can't be in New York to like at the studio there 5 days a week, the kind of thing that is required really to cultivate that daily practice like I did.
Mhm.
So I end up working with people who, like I mentioned, a handful who like at a more advanced level, but it's partly just what circumstances allow me to share. If I were a traveling teacher like you and they wanted me to just come in and go to work in their Mysore room, it would be like really relaxing. I could do it with my eyes closed, and because
Yeah.
I've done it so much. And
Mhm.
I'm still trying to figure out what to make of that because that is not the work that I'm called to do anymore. And the work that, I have to kind of try to figure out what's the best way because you said it beautifully. Whatever path, whatever method that you're kind of like embrace, in a way, it doesn't necessarily look like any one thing, but it does require effort and devotion and a sense of possibility. And then I'm going to sound real smart because I can quote something, but it's one of the few things we say, tapasva dhyayeshvara pranidhanani kriya yoga. So, he says in the opening of the sadhana pada that it has these three essential components. He later on talks about the 8 limbs of yoga, but this seems to be this real core.
Yeah.
And when it gets to Ishvara Pranidhana, the word Pranidhana, totally unbeknownst to the Brahmin tradition, of course, because why would they know this? But Pranidhana is what you do in a bodhisattva commitment. So it's called the Bodhisattva Pranidhana or prayer. And basically pledging to attain enlightenment and remain in samsara until all beings are enlightenment, which they never are. And so you never actually leave, Russell, but leave in a sense because it ceases to be samsara for you. It will cease to be samsara for you. And that Ishvara Pranidhana too is interesting because then it later in the chapter defines Ishvara as Ishvara Klesha Karma Aparamrishta Vishaya Purusha Vishesha Ishvara. So Ishvara is a special kind of person that has never been afflicted by klesha and karma. But the very nature of the human existence or any embodied existence is that you are defined by klesha or by karma. So what is that? What is this? Just a make-believe person, I think, is that it is a holding place of possibility that you could eventually, you have to open the mind. It's not saying this is what it's going to look like. It's not saying like when you finally get enlightened, anything, you have to believe that there's infinite possibility. You have to. That's also something you try to model in, teaching people.
Yeah, I love
Or they just think you're a total weirdo. That's possible.
We're going to talk to your partner tomorrow about your trip to Nepal.
Beautiful.
We are trying to encourage as many people to go with you as possible because it is advised to die in Nepal if you want rebirth as a lama.
Let's not talk so much about death.
Not on John's trip.
No, you just don't do it on my trip.
It does create merit if you die on John's trip.
Tell everyone where they can find out more about coming and working with you or also the trip.
Yeah, so all of Vajra Yoga activities right now, we're so small and building. At Tibet House in New York, we have a weekday program, which you can find out through, I think it's thus.org, tibethouseus.org. And like I say, it's a work in progress right now. There are only 3 days a week where we teach elements of both the asana hatha yoga kind of approach and more teaching the Tibetan structured approach to experiencing and enlivening one's energetic body. You could, I guess, follow me on
follow on the Instagram.
And we'll put all the links in the show notes.
Somebody just started following me on Instagram because I shared this. The Spiritual Pilgrim.
That's
Corey.
That's Corey, who you're going to Nepal with.
Follow the Spiritual Pilgrim.
And you should do that. You should totally do that.
And John, I just got to say, this conversation has been so enlightening, and spending time with you is always such a pleasure and a blessing.
Likewise.
I've had so many awesome downloads while I've been listening to you. So thank you. And I wish the saddest thing about this is we don't live closer to New York. And because I want to come do some Tibetan yoga with you.
Yeah. I want to come and visit you guys, and I'll talk to you later about your work. It sounds really, really interesting, and I bet it's wonderful. Thank you guys for having me.
Wasn't that just so much fun? So just as a reminder, you can check out John teaching Vajra Yoga classes through the Tibet House US in New York City, Or you could head upstate to Newburgh Yoga Shala, where he teaches some classes there at our good friend Bibi Lorenzetti's yoga studio. And if you want to join him on the spiritual pilgrimage that he's co-facilitating with Corey Michael Bryant, you can reach out to him or the spiritual pilgrim. They will be in Nepal, September 27th to October 7th. And I would check it out if you ever want to go hike and learn and experience Buddhism in the Kathmandu Valley. This is going to be a wonderful retreat to deepen your understanding of Buddhism and yoga and its evolution. Before you sign off today, I wanted to invite you to an intimate group experience, a small group that Russell and I are curating. We're holding space for people who want to go deep. We're curating a beautiful experience with 2 other facilitators who are not just friends, but are family to us. And it will be happening in early November. This will be on the west coast of Canada, and it's going to be an incredible time to truly slow down, to get off your devices, a place to reconnect, and remember who you are beneath all of the noise of everyday life through art, therapy, yoga, meditation, breath work, and different embodiment practices, nature immersion. This weekend retreat will hold so much power and potential for your growth. This space will be held in a way that is truly there for your transformation, with care and guidance and the conditions for doing some very deep listening and deep healing work. I cannot wait to be offering this incredible experience to a very small group of lucky individuals who want to join us for this journey. So if you would like to be included in this journey or you want to know more, then please reach out to me. You know where to find me on Instagram at Harmony Slater Official. And I would love to share with you more details about dates, times, places, and costs for this incredible experience. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.